All right, well, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Jeff Mitchell, and I work here at Rhodes Scholar, and it's my pleasure to host today's virtual lecture, An Introduction to Falconry. Now, these lectures are free and available not just to Rhodes Scholar participants, but are available to anyone who wants to learn. So please spread the word. You see, this series of online lectures is critical to helping us pursue our not-for-profit mission of making learning accessible to as many lifelong learners as we can. And that includes those who do not have the physical ability, the financial means, or the option to leave their home and come join us on a Rhodes Scholar program. Ultimately, this series would not be possible without the support of viewers like you who have funded this project through many generous donations. So please, consider making a donation to not-for-profit Rhodes Scholar so that we can continue to provide educational experiences both in the virtual classroom and out on our 5,500 learning adventures all around the world. Visit www.rhodescholar.org/give to show your support with a monetary donation. Every dollar helps. So while the Rhodes Scholar headquarters is based out of Boston, Massachusetts, we have offices and staff all around the world. And today you will be hearing from Chris Cameron. Chris is the retired executive director of Camp Ocean Pines in Cambria, California. A naturalist at heart, Chris is a regular workshop leader for the Association for Environmental and Outdoor Education. And as a consultant, Chris has helped establish the California Regional Environmental Education Community Network. This statewide communication network provides teachers with resources needed to increase the environmental literacy of California students. And he has a passion for mentoring staff and is dedicated to developing in students a love for inquiry and nature. Chris is a featured expert on Rhodes Scholar programs, including program number 15752, California Good Migrations, Elephant Seals, Whales, and Birds. Now, a few quick notes before we begin. Chris will be presenting for approximately 30 minutes, after which we will host a 10 to 15 minute question and answer session. And during that session, you can submit your questions using the question and answer icon that's located at the bottom of your screen. Afterwards, I will read a few questions live for Chris to answer. Now, there are a couple hundred of you out there watching live, so apologies if we do not get to your question. We will certainly try our best to get through as many as possible. Now, should technical issues force you to miss any portion of our webinar, do not worry. We will be adding a recording of the lecture to our online virtual lecture library afterwards for all to watch. And finally, at the end of our Q&A and our time here together, you will be prompted to take a very short survey, just like you're on a regular Rhodes Scholar program. And we ask that you please just take a few moments to fill it out. That your feedback is immensely helpful to us. It will help us grow and improve our virtual lecture series. So, without further ado, let's have a warm virtual welcome for today's presenter, Chris Cameron.
Well, welcome everyone. I don't know what a warm virtual welcome is, but I'm glad you're all here. And today we are going to talk about falconry and human and raptor interactions. It's a pretty amazing thing. This is me and one of my birds that I was growing up. We are going to talk today a little bit about ancient history. We're going to talk about what is falconry, and we're going to talk about the 4 steps of falconry. And then we're going to talk about the present and what opportunities humans have to interact with raptors presently. And we're going to talk about several different things you'll see on the list there on the right. And then we'll do questions and answers. If you are a note-taking kind of person, there will be 10 points. If you've got your pencil and paper, there are 10 points that we'll be talking about today, and they'll be pretty clear as we go along. So how it all starts is observation. This is a photograph of the peregrine falcons at Morro Bay Rock taken by a friend of mine. And when you see a raptor, you see incredible speed, you see strength, and you see beauty. And those are the sorts of things that inspire us. In fact, they don't just inspire us, they've inspired nations and countries and military and all sorts of things. We see raptors on coinage, on symbols, on money, on flags, because of this view of strength and independence. But this interaction the humans have had with raptors is not a new thing. This goes way, way, way back. First recorded in Mesopotamia over 3,000 years ago, falconry and interactions with raptors has moved along to Mongolia, China, Japan, Pakistan, India, and we see that it started with a way to get food. The very first image that we have of falconry is dated over 5,000 BC, and it was found in the Tell, or an ancient city site in Syria. And here you can see with his bird and a rabbit that he caught. And so the gathering of food with a trained raptor is called falconry. But there are other sorts of things people have done with birds. We have revered them in the past. In King Tut's tomb, we have statues and jewelry depicting falcons. We even have falcon mummies in Egyptian tombs. The gods and goddesses were named after falcons, and it's gone over to Mongolia, Japan, and Pakistan, and it still exists in those places, which makes it a living human heritage as pronounced by UNESCO. So let's talk about the process of falconry itself. Falconry has 4 steps. You might be familiar with this picture. This is the eagle falconry, the eagle huntress movie from a girl in Mongolia who trapped and trained and hunted with a golden eagle. I just got back from a golden eagle trip in Wyoming working with eagles back there. So the falconry process has 4 steps: trap, train, hunt, and release. Can you all say it with me? Ready? Trap, train, hunt, and release. Now, I didn't hear everybody, so I want to do it again. So everybody, I know you're sitting at your living room, but I want everybody to say it. The 4 steps of falconry are trap, train, hunt, and release. Did you get it? There's 4. The first one is trap. So trapping a bird is how you start. You can't start without a bird, so you trap a bird. Now, you cannot have a bird as a pet in the United States. It's illegal. There was a Migratory Bird Protection Act in 1918 that protected all birds. So there are some exceptions, and falconry is one of those exceptions. So if you get a permit, you can trap a bird. You can only trap a first-year bird in California. You can only trap an American kestrel or a red-tailed hawk. And again, it has to be a first-year bird. Adult birds are not allowed to be trapped. So how do you trap something? Trapping something starts with knowing your subject. So if you wanted to trap me, you'd have to study me. And in a short time, you would get to know that I like chocolate chip cookies. So should you put a plate full of warm, steamy, soft chocolate chip cookies over on the other side of the yard and have a net in a tree or a pit or something, I would not see those things. I would just see the chocolate chip cookies. And I would go right after them, and then you'd pull the net or whatever, and I would be trapped. So you have to know your subject, know what they like, have some sort of a beer. And then you have to have patience. So when I was trapping eagles in Wyoming, because they were eating the lambs of ranchers, I would sit for 4 or 5 or 6 hours on one trap waiting for the eagle. And in the same way, you have to have patience if you're going to trap. Most of the birds I've trapped, though, I have come to the trap in 15 seconds to a minute or 2 minutes, because you're looking for a bird that's hungry and you know them and you know what they like. And so then you put the barrier in and you trap them. So falconry has 4 steps. What are they again? Trap, train, hunt, and release. Can you say that again? Trap, train, hunt, and release. And the first step is trap. The second step is train. So training kids in the audience, this is the way you get your parents to do stuff. You whine, and if you whine long enough, you will develop in your parents a conditioned response, and they will give you what you want because you have conditioned them. And so that's the same way we train falcons. If you wanted to train me, again, you would hold up a chocolate chip cookie and you'd say, hey, Chris, here's a cookie. And you'd go, cookie. And I would turn my head, I would see the cookie, and I would go towards the cookie. And then you'd be in the grocery store where I'm shopping, and you'd hold up a cookie and go, Chris, cookie. And I would turn my head, I would go down the aisle, and I would get a cookie. And so training is something that we do with our birds. We give them food as they come to our glove or come to our lure. And so training is the second step of falconry. The first step was, yep, trap. The second step is, yes, train. It's right there on the screen. Come on now. And the third step is hunt. Trap, train, hunt. After your bird is trained, then you hunt with their bird, because falconry is the process of capturing game with a trained falcon or a hawk or an eagle or an owl. So you hunt, and hunting is something that comes natural to the bird. Now, you may be a vegetarian, but all raptors are obligate carnivores. They only eat meat. So you are hunting for meat. That would be rabbits or squirrels or mice or rats or quail or something like that. And so we have jobs. As the bird is flying free above me or from tree to tree, I have a job, and I am trying to flush rabbits or quail or squirrels so my hawk can grab them. So hunting is the third step. The first step was trap. The second step was train. The third step is hunt. And hunting, again, is a sustainable activity that's done in the winter. We hunt in the spring or summer because that's when animals are having babies, and those babies aren't experienced enough. So so it's not really fair. You trap, you train, and then you hunt in the fall or the winter. And then after you've spent a season of training your bird and hunting with your bird, by the way, the training period takes, shortest of is about 10 days, longest is about a month or so. So it's not a long time to train a bird to fly free above your head from tree to tree or over your head on the soar as you hunt together. And then you hunt for the season. And then after the season is over, and here rabbit season in California is usually over in March, then you normally release your bird back into the wild. You take off all the gear and you release it back into the wild, because now it has had good health, good hunting, and now it's going to go out as an adult with experience and health checks and everything like that. So you're going to send a healthy bird back into the wild to continue breeding. So that's the normal process of falconry. Remember, there are 4 steps. They are trap, train, hunt, and release. Now, I mentioned earlier, you cannot have a raptor as a pet. That's not legal in the United States. In England, you can have one as a pet, but not in the United States. In the United States, all birds of prey are regulated by the state and federal authorities. That would be U.S. Fish and Wildlife and California Fish and Wildlife here, in my case. But there are 6 other reasons, or 5 other reasons, including falconry, that you can have a bird. So let's go through those. So if you're taking notes, here are the next 6 things. The first one is rehab. So if you love raptors, but you don't think you could bring yourself to hunting, you could still have interaction with raptors if you do rehab. Rehab is fixing broken birds and releasing them back into the wild. Now, every season, right now, every wildlife center, every local wildlife center is full of baby birds and full of baby raptors. They feed them, they give them health checks, they mend them, and then they release them back again. If you want to get your hands-on fix, then you can go work at a rehab center. They all need volunteers and donors. But they only get 180 days to fix and release a bird. If it takes longer than that, the non-releasable bird must be put down, because their permit says they can fix birds to release back into the wild. If it's not releasable, it has to be put down. So rehab is one of the ways you can be involved with birds. Another way is education. Most rehab places also have a permit because being lovers of birds, it breaks their heart to put one down if it's strong and healthy and beautiful, but can't fly because of a broken wing or something. That bird can be put on an education permit. And most zoos or outdoor education centers, many places have um, captive raptors that can be used for education. But these birds must be either captive bred or non-releasable birds to use for education. You can't go get a healthy bird out of the wild to use for education. Only broken birds or captive bred birds can be used for education. So that was the second permit. The third permit is falconry, and we've talked about that. To become a falconer, in California, you have to be at least 12 years old. Behind me, later on, you'll see a young lady a person named Alana, and Alana started with me as an apprentice when she was 12. And now Alana is heading into college, no longer an apprentice, but a general falconer on her way to becoming a master falconer. So to start the process, you have to pass a knowledge test, and then the agencies come to your site and make sure you have all the equipment and proper housing for a bird. And once you get a license, and then you have to get a sponsor, someone who will apprentice you. And that's usually the hardest part because there are not a lot of crusty old master falconers who want to take on an apprentice. But if you get those first three things, pass the knowledge test, get your equipment inspected, and then get a sponsor, then you can go on to the falconry process, which has 4 steps. And those 4 steps are, remember, 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you get them all? Trap, train, hunt, and release. Okay, so the next permit that's available is an abatement permit. And what that is using the natural predator-prey relationships that have developed over tens of thousands of years to protect things that we care about. So if you're a vegetarian, if you don't like hunting, you may still like this because this is the sort of thing that protects wine grapes and blueberries and human health by clearing airstrips and protecting waterways. One of the things that's happened in California here is we were having spinach fields that were getting E. coli bacteria and making people sick. So the USDA would go and check the fields to make sure there was no pollution in the fields causing people to get sick. And what they found is the spinach fields were right across the road from a landfill, and all the gulls were at the landfill slopping around in the muck and then coming over to have a salad lunch where they would transfer the muck from their feet in. And so one of the ways to protect human health is we have falconers at the landfills encouraging the gulls to go down to the beach and eat a sand crab or fly and eat natural food instead of slopping around in the muck. We also can use falcons and hawks at resorts, beaches, waterways, and buildings to reduce the buildup of feces that causes some problems in our buildings. So the next permit is a captive breeding permit, and this is one of the things that protects wild populations. Falconers have been breeding birds for ages and ages, and this reduces a take on the wild population and in fact helps us reintroduce birds back into the population should those birds have had a big problem, such as the DDT problems in the 70s and 80s. Falconers are also at the head of the condor recovery. They've also helped with owls and falcons and hawks that are declining in other places, like the upland mottled falcon down in Texas and other hawks and falcons around the world. So using the ancient husbandry techniques that we've been practiced in for thousands of years, we can now do captive breeding and help protect wild populations. The final permit we're going to talk about, and there are more, but these were 6 that were easy to see. The final one is the scientific permit. Sometimes it's a scientific collecting permit. Sometimes it's a permit that we use to tag birds and to watch for migrations, do population studies. It's important if we're going to put up, for example, a wind farm offshore. We want to make sure that wind farm is not going to slice and dice falcons on a migratory path. And it's also a way to study, to figure out where the birds are to increase ecotourism. So, and finally, down there at the bottom, you'll see that birds are used in collections, and universities and museums have collections of birds. And those collections have helped us through the time study the thickness of the eggshells to see what was the problem when DDT was happening, or color changes over time due to pollution or things like that. So science is the last permit that I wanted to bring up. So falconry, it's a pretty cool thing. It's one of the ways you can have your hands on a bird and have a close relationship and interaction with a hawk or a falcon. There are several other ways, in fact, 5 other ways that we brought up. A scientific collecting permit, remember that? And the abatement permit to protect human health. There's the captive breeding permit to protect wild populations, and those other permits that we talked about too. And if you're taking notes, there were 6 of those permits and 4 steps of falconry. So that's it for the presentation. I think at this point, we will go on to questions and answers. Behind me, you will see some birds. We have 2 birds in the yard here. We have a Cooper's hawk and we have a Harris's hawk. The Cooper's hawk was a little bird that jumped out of a nest and was going to die. So we gathered that up and protected that bird and giving it good health and training. And that will be a falconry bird this year, and then it will be released after the season, most likely. And we also have a Harris hawk, and the Harris hawk is a captive bred hawk. Behind me, you'll also meet Alana, the apprentice turned general falconer. And so we are ready for your questions. I think I'm gonna walk over here closer. Alana, let's grab a bird in your hand and let's sit over here. Let me get my mask on as we sit close together. Okay, we're ready for
Chris.
questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, we're going to start our Q&A session now. So if you have a question, you can submit it using the question and answer icon that's down at the bottom of your screen. But Chris, to start us off, I have a question here who's from a participant who's wondering, Miriam is asking, so after training, when you start hunting, why doesn't the falcon just take the rabbit and run? Wouldn't that be a tastier treat than whatever you give them as a treat in training?
You have them on the ground. Hang on, Alana. They are used to you being together on the ground with feeding. So feeding is one of the places where you are meeting together and enjoying your time together. And so the bird does not mind you being on the ground with them in the presence of food.
All right.
And often the rabbit is too heavy to carry anyway.
Okay. So when training the falcon, how do you get them to give up what would be their natural diet?
So we are hunting their natural diet, but they give it up because you do a trade. And so trading is you are partners in this hunt. So you did the flushing, they did the catching. You may have to dispatch the animal because a falcon or a hawk on their own would normally just slowly eat the bird before the bird or the rabbit before it's even dead. So we humanely put the animal out of its misery and then let the hawk or falcon or eagle eat the bird on the ground. And then we trade it to a little treat. And then if you were using this rabbit for food for yourself, you would cover the rabbit with your hunting bag or a grass or something. And then you would offer the hawk a snack from your hand, and they would jump to your hand for the snack. And then you would surreptitiously put the rabbit in your bag. You can't just grab the rabbit away from the hawk, or that is called stealing. And if you steal something from a partner, the partner no longer wants to be your partner. So you surreptitiously place the rabbit in your hunting bag as you give it a treat.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So do the falcons come back like season after season, or how do you keep track of these birds in the area? Are you trapping new birds every time?
Yes, you don't trap the same bird twice because that bird will now be an adult. and is not legal to trap an adult bird. You can only trap a juvenile bird. And so once you release your bird, he or she go into the breeding system, and those birds are off limits. So yes, you trap a new fresh bird every year. The mortality rate for most birds is between 60 and 90%. So the first year birds, if the red-tailed hawks laid 100 eggs, 90 of those eggs would not turn into be adult birds, only 10 of them. So the ones that we trap are now getting medical attention, good care, good feeding, and good training and protection from all the elements. And by doing that, you have added to the population instead of detracted from the population.
Now, are there any types of particular hunting birds that are more difficult to train?
Owls are quite difficult to train. Their head is so full of eyes and eye matter. There's not a lot left for good decision making and training. They are very difficult to train. So I've trained some owls in the past, and those have been the most difficult. There are other birds that are more flighty. Some are more calm. Right now, the most calm bird and most popular bird for falconry is called the Harris hawk. It's a desert hawk from down in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas.
And so who is it that you've got there with us? I know Alana has a bird.
So Alana, what do you have?
This is a juvenile Cooper's hawk.
And how old is this bird?
He's a couple months old.
And you still see some down feathers on his head. And what do you have on his back there?
That is called a transmitter. It's a GPS tracker for these birds. So if they fly away, we'll be able to get them back and get them safe.
Does that happen fairly often that you lose track of birds?
Yeah, sometimes they'll just take off or be chased off by something, and we'll want to be able to get them back and make sure they're safe and good and bring them in for the night.
So I do have a question here from one of our participants who wants to know, what is the lifespan of falcons and eagles?
All the different birds have different spans, but if you're going to keep a bird, and once you take a bird out of the system, you are allowed to keep it. You don't have to release it. Most people do. But if you keep a bird, be thinking about a 20-year time span.
Now, I have a question here from Sarah, who is wondering, would you ever trap a bird in one part of the country, say Texas, and take it to California or someplace else to train or hunt, or are you keeping them within their own environments there?
You can cross state lines to hunt with a bird, just like if you were going to hunt, if you were a Californian and you wanted to hunt deer in Colorado, you could do that. So it's just a hunting thing. So yes, you can hunt with your birds in another state. When you take a bird to another state, you have to have a health certificate to ensure that you're not bringing in diseases from your state to another. You also have to buy a hunting license in that state. And if the state does not allow hunting with falcons, like Hawaii, for example, then you could not do that.
Now, when you do trap, Sharon is wondering, how can you trap just juvenile birds and not adults? Wouldn't both respond to the traps?
You normally are out scouting around, and with a good pair of binoculars, you can see what kind of bird you're trying to trap. And so if you look and you see an adult bird, you do not drop your trap. If you see a juvenile bird, then you drop your trap. You have to be a good enough birder to be able to identify the difference between a juvenile bird and an adult bird. And there are differences, and you must be able to tell that. If you accidentally trap an adult bird, in fact, the trapping picture on the slides was that was a red-shouldered hawk, which was not allowed in California at the time. I set the trap under a juvenile red-tail hawk, but the red-shoulder hawk was faster, came in and went after the bait. So since it was not a legal bird, and that would be the same if it was an adult bird, then you just simply release it from the trap.
And the juvenile red trailhawk, that's what Alana had over there?
She had a Cooper's hawk, and
Cooper's
now,
hawk.
what do you have now, Alana?
This is a Harris hawk.
Tell us about a Harris hawk.
They're native to like parts of Arizona. They're not in California. He's a captive bred. His name is Marvin. He's about 2 years old. He's in the middle of the molt. As you can tell, you can see his tail feathers growing in the back. And he's a pretty sweet boy.
Anybody have questions for Alana and the Harris hawk?
I do have a question here. Somebody wants to know, how did you guys both become interested in falconry?
I'll go first. So I took a 3rd or 4th grade trip to, we have a landfill in SLO called Cold Canyon.
SLO is.
San Luis Obispo, and there was a falconer there doing abatement with a red tail and a couple falcons and an owl, and I just talked to this guy for a little bit, and I knew that's something I really, really wanted to do. So I waited until I was like 11 and a half. I got in contact with Chris, and then I took a test, built my muse, and then I got my first red tail when I was about 12.
And my story is, I've always been interested in the natural world, and I got my first kestrel in about 1980, 81, something like that. My college professor, my biology, I gave him some rattlesnakes that I had caught, and he gave me a kestrel, and I trained that kestrel for a bit. So that was my first kestrel. I think before that, I had my hands on barn owls. I was a nature instructor at a camp down in San Diego, and we had some barn owls. So I think my first raptor was a barn owl in around 1978.
I have a question here. Somebody's wondering, could you talk about the differences between like medieval falconry and modern day falconry, or are they still pretty similar amongst the two?
They are exactly the same, except one thing. We now have radio telemetry or GPS that we can put on our bird. Those are different things. Radio telemetry emits a radio signal that we catch with a receiver, and then GPS is, global position satellite imagery that can go down to your cell phone or something and show you on the map exactly where the bird is. Radio will just show us, will give us an indication of a beep, beep, beep to where the bird is. In the old days, all they had was bells. So they would have bells on the feet or bells on the tail. If they lost a bird, then they would ask all the peasants nearby to listen for the bells, and they would pay the population to help them find their bird with the bells. So essentially the only difference in falconry today is telemetry versus bells. And we sometimes still use bells. Dave Noble, I think he's from Wisconsin. He is the greatest bell maker in the United States, and he makes a living selling falconry bells around the world. Alana was talking about how we, do our birds fly off often. Last year, the year before, when I was flying a Cooper's hawk, it grabbed the prey and then flew under a bush down a canyon. And for the life of me, I could not find the bird. I knew the bird was within 20 or 30 yards, but could not find it. It would just stayed still, perfectly still underneath a bush. And so I had to use telemetry to find the bird, even though it was only about 20 yards away. And if I had a bell, it would have been quicker because he would have wiggled his little tail feathers or shaken a leg, and I could have found him quicker with a bell than with telemetry.
Now, I have a question here from Thomas, who is wondering, can you explain what it means to be a master falconer as opposed to, I think you said like a general falconer before?
Yeah, so in California, and it's pretty much the same around the United States where falconry is allowed. You start as an apprentice, and in California, you can start at age 12. Your apprenticeship must be at least 2 years long. If you start at 12, it's got to be 4 years long because you can't move up to the general falconer level until you're 16. So Alana started at 12 and is now a general falconer. And then after you're general falconer for 5 years, you can move into becoming a master falconer. The difference is what birds you can have and how many birds you can have, things like that. And if you can sponsor an apprentice, things like that. But there is no super master falconer. We are all learning all day long. Every time we fly our birds, we learn something new.
That's great, Chris. Now, I think we have time for maybe one more question here. I have a question from Pamela, who says, you've described falconry as a working relationship with the birds. Do you bond with individual falcons, and are you sad when you have to release them?
The last Cooper's hawk that I released, I got from the city. So it was a city bird. So I flew him around the city. I would release him, I would walk around the block, and he would go in and out of everyone's bird feeders, you know, chasing the sparrows and all. And then when 3 years later, I released him because he was such a fun bird. I kept him for more than one season. And I finally released him because a female Cooper's hawk kept flying around saying, hey, baby, you know, you're handsome and I'm available. So I took off all his gear and I released him, and he stayed around for a few days, and then finally he just took off. And so I still see a coop overhead, and I wonder if it's mine or not, or if it's his baby's. I'm not sure. But normally I have more of a farm animal view of animal ownership than the pet view.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Chris. Everyone, I think that is all the time that we have for today. Again, I'd really like to thank Chris Cameron for his excellent presentation here. Again, you can see him out on our Rhodes Scholar program, number 15752, California Good Migrations, Elephants, Seals, Whales, and Birds. A big thank you to Alana and our special guests as well. And a big thank you to all of you for joining us here today. So again, should you wish to donate to Rhodes Scholar, the link to do so is www.rhodescholar.org/give. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Chris.
Bye-bye.